Hello. Today I'm going to look at the NIS chiropractic technique website. Several of my colleagues have been studying it and implementing it. It is claiming to be based on the principles of neuroscience. I've studied neurology as an amateur professional. Let's say I don't have any degrees in it other than my chiropractic degree. And I use it a lot in my practice, and there's all sorts of chiropractic techniques cropping up claiming that they're using it, which is awesome. If it's really true, then it's great. But the colleagues that I have a hard time explaining to me how what they're doing works or why they're doing what they're doing. So anyway, I decided to look at their website and just, in a live fashion, give you my opinion of what I'm seeing on their website. It doesn't mean that their technique is not working or that it's bad or that it's good or that it is working, but it's just what are they communicating well to the public through their website, and does it sound legitimate or not? Doesn't mean that it is legitimate or not. It's just the communication they're giving me from their website. So that being said, I'm going to see if I can make my head a little smaller here and take us to their website, which is right here. Healthcare, Neurolink, healthcare that extends beyond the scope of mainstream medicine. So it's a form of healthcare, apparently. So I don't even know if it's only for chiropractors or is it for dentists, MDs, also acupuncturists, I don't know. But on their homepage, healthcare that extends beyond the scope of mainstream medicine. I don't really know what that means. Extends beyond. That's confusing to me. Does anybody out there know what that means? If so, maybe put it in the comments or send me an email. Healthcare that extends beyond the scope of mainstream medicine. Scope, let's look up the definition of scope. Intention, or the object of. The space or opportunity for unhampered motion, activity, or thought. The opportunity for unhampered thought. Okay, so they're making a judgment of mainstream medicine that they probably have some form of hampered thought. So this Neurolink is extending beyond the hampered thought of mainstream medicine. Okay, if that's what they mean, then that makes sense to me, and that's a good thing. It's putting down mainstream medicine. I think there's good and bad of mainstream medicine. So the first sentence on their website, they're pretty much putting down mainstream medicine. I don't know that that's good or bad, but it is what it is. Okay, based on the principles of neuroscience. Sounds good. Based on the principles of neuroscience. Why not just based on neuroscience? Why does it need to be the principles of neuroscience? And is there a difference between basing something on neuroscience versus basing something on the principles of neuroscience? It makes me suspicious that they're not basing it on neuroscience, but they're basing it on some concepts that they came up with while studying neuroscience and then jumping off of that as a springboard into their own philosophy of how to do things, which isn't a bad thing. It's probably a good thing. I do that sort of thing all the time. But in that sense, it's not really based on neuroscience. It's based on their interpretation of how to apply or how to go beyond neuroscience. I'm reading a lot into this, but based on the principles of neuroscience. It sounds really good and cool, but again, I don't really know what it means. Neuralink is committed to developing proprietary healthcare methods for a spectrum of complaints. Neuralink is committed. So Neuralink is committed. So now it's Neuralink is a group of people, or is it a technique? How does a technique commit itself to something? So that's a little awkward. Neuralink, it's capitalized, so I'm guessing they mean the group of people who practice Neuralink, or is it the group of people who come up with Neuralink or research Neuralink? Neuralink is committed to developing proprietary healthcare methods. So what does proprietary mean? I'm pretty sure it means secret. Proprietary. One that possesses, owns, or holds exclusive right to something. Something that is used, produced, or marketed under exclusive legal right of the inventor or maker. Specifically, a drug that is protected by secrecy, patent, or copyright against free competition as to name, product, composition, or process of manufacture. That doesn't make sense because a patent, you have to divulge your information in order to get a patent. So it's by definition, a patent means it's no longer secret. I guess it's saying or. So it could be secrecy or a patent or copyright. All right. So proprietary healthcare methods for a spectrum of complaints. Why do they need to develop secret healthcare methods? That's suspicious to me. And why is that a benefit to the person who's supposed to be reading their website? I can't tell, is this for the patient? It says up here, find a practitioner. So I'm assuming this is for the patient. Seems to me if you had a really great treatment, you would want to share it with people. You would make your money off of implementing the treatment on patients so that they get better. The patient would pay you, or the insurance would pay you, but that you would want your colleagues to know about it. Sure, you could make money teaching your colleagues, but why do you need to keep it a secret? I don't get that part, which makes me a little suspicious for some reason. Neuralink is the developer. Neuralink, with a copyright, is the developer. Okay, so again, they're referring to it as a group of people. Neuralink is, or a person, is the developer of the Neurological Integration System, NIS. Neurological Integration System. Neurological Integration System. So system must be the treatment technique that they do. Neurological integration. I don't know what that means. Neurological. Brain integration. That would make sense to me. Nervous system integration. Body integration. Mind-body integration would make a lot of sense. Neurological integration. Neurological. A branch of medicine. course, they are going beyond medicine, the scope of medicine. A branch of medicine concern. Oh, wait, that's neurology. Neurological. What is neurological? Is neurological even a word? Neurological. It's not in the dictionary. Neurological. What does that mean, neurological? Neurological. I don't think that's a word. Neurological. Neurologic, an adjective referring to the nervous system, neurologic, referring to neurology. Neurology, the branch of medicine that deals with the nervous system and its diseases. Neurological. Okay, so it's an adjective. Neurological is an adjective, meaning it describes something. Neurological. Let's look at this. No, neurological. Of or relating to the nervous system or neurology. How would you use it in a sentence? Can we use it in a sentence? Neurological. Okay, so a neurological condition, neurological assessment, neurological exam, neurological disorder, neurological exam. So a neurological integration system, so a neurological treatment. Let's see. All right. So what it means is it's a neurological treatment system. Neurological integration system. All right. Sounds confusing. Maybe they're going for big words that people don't quite know what it means, but it sounds smart. Maybe that's what they're going for, because it certainly doesn't tell me much about what they're doing. A global training program for practitioners. Okay, so it's not just chiropractors, offering profound benefits to patients throughout the world. Sounds wonderful. NIS seminars. How can NIS help me? Cellular signaling is brain controlled. On this basis, we have life. Cellular signaling. Okay, so a cell is the building block of life. It's the unit of life. A cell, cellular signaling, so it's communicating between cells, I guess is what they're saying. Cellular signaling is brain controlled. Sure, cellular signaling, brain controlled. Not all of it. When I touch the skin, there's receptors that are deformed, depressed, and they send a signal up a nerve that goes to your brain, and the brain does not control that. There are some receptors the brain does control. One would be the muscle spindle cell. It's a stretch receptor in the belly of a muscle, and the gamma motor neuron comes out of the spinal cord down to little muscles, intrinsic muscles that are on the ends of the muscle spindle receptor, and they can contract, which tightens the muscle spindle and makes it more sensitive. That's the only one I know of. I'm sure there may be others, but that's one of the main ways that the brain controls cellular, I wouldn't call it cellular signaling, that's a weird way to put it, but it controls the sensitivity of the muscle spindle such that it will change its sensation of muscle, of movement, stretch, and approximation of joints. But most of the skin receptors are not brain controlled. I'm not sure what cellular signaling, so maybe they mean some cellular signaling is brain controlled. There's also hormones that control all kinds of things. The brain does regulate a lot of the glands that secrete these hormones, so that's true largely. On this basis, we have life. I don't see how that those seem like two completely separate statements. I'm not sure what they're talking about. Cellular signaling is brain controlled. On this basis, we have life. Life is a mystery that no one understands. It's the biggest question of the universe. Why is life here? And what's the difference between an alive person and a dead person a second before and a second after they die? There's not much difference at the cellular level. Maybe oxygen levels are down compared 1 second before and after. But anyway, that it's just, I'm not sure what they mean. Going on, any disruption to this process is a potential threat to all body systems and our well-being. Any disruption to this process is a potential threat to all body systems and our well-being. A potential threat. Why are they saying potential? And sure, in this process, what process are they talking about? Cellular signaling? So a disruption in the cellular signaling is a potential threat to all body systems. Sure, of course, and our well-being. But are they saying that, or are they saying the disruption in the brain's controlling of the cellular signaling? Which we've already decided that the brain doesn't control most of the, or a large percentage of the receptors. NIS allows access to both investigate and correct these processes to achieve the best possible human function. NIS allows access to both investigate, allows access to who, how. NIS allows access to both investigate and correct these processes to achieve the best possible human function. So I kind of get a feel for what they're saying, that there's a problem in the cells signaling in the brain, and however they're connected, that disrupts, that there's a chain reaction perhaps that affects all kinds of other systems and causes our well-being to diminish. And this treatment technique, neurological integration system, allows access, I'm assuming the doctor, allows the doctor to investigate. I think they mean enables the doctor, or is a tool the doctor can use to investigate and correct these processes, so the cellular signaling in the brain, I'm assuming, to achieve the best possible human function. Okay, so if I interpret it, what I think they're trying to say, it sounds good. I don't know why they can't describe it. If I'm confused, I'm pretty sure a patient's going to be confused. Okay, so the science behind the NIS system. Great. For over 30 years, Dr. Alan Phillips has been researching and developing NIS. Okay, he's researching it and developing it. Great. Based on the principles of neuroscience. Principles of neuroscience. Why not the principles of neurology? Neuroscience. Principles of neuroscience. What are the principles of neuroscience? NIS is based on validated scientific research. Validated scientific research. Meaning, why is it validated? Because it's been published? As NIS continues to evolve, look back at some of the research that NIS is built on and read some of our testimonials. So I'm going to click on research, look back at some of the research. All right, I want to do that. Oh, 403 forbidden. Access to this page is forbidden. Oops. All right, so that's not good. The thing that was the most important for at least me as a prospective doctor in learning the technique, the link is broken to the research. Let's look at as NIS continues to evolve. Click on that. Okay, here we go. NIS continues to evolve, written 4 years ago. Hawaii in '89 became the launch pad for the NIS seminar program. I was invited to share my understanding of the neurological, physiological response to treatment using the NIS principles to a small group of doctors in Hawaii. Okay, so he had already developed the NIS, he just hadn't developed the seminars. This understanding grew to encompass research relating to learning difficulties in children and its relationship to Down syndrome. This understanding, I was invited to share my understanding. Okay, so it's not this understanding, it's my understanding grew to encompass research relating to learning difficulties in children and its relationship to Down syndrome. What relationship? Your understanding its relationship to Down syndrome. Because at first it sounds like the learning difficulties of children who don't have Down syndrome have a relationship to Down syndrome. I don't think that's what he means, but that's what the English he's using, it makes it sound that way. But I think it's my understanding grew to encompass research relating to learning difficulties in children, and it grew to encompass research related to Down syndrome. Pretty sure that's what he means, but that's not the way it's written. The way it's written, the learning difficulties in children and its relationship to Down, See, what's its? If it was the children, it would be their relationship. So I guess technically its is NIS. NIS is relationship to Down syndrome. Okay, interesting. I was asked to present a paper to the South Pacific Commission Conference in New Caledonia, which raised several points of interest for the countries of the South Pacific region. The World Health Organization asked me, interesting, to present my findings on learning difficulties to the National Council of Women in Fiji and embark on a lecture series to the medical school in Fiji. Okay. Later, travel to Japan and Guam enabled further discussion with interested government agencies. Okay, so you got asked to teach your understanding of neurological, physiological response to treatment using NIS principles at a medical school in Fiji. At that time, Carl Prebum and David Bohm, MDs and PhDs, were considering a very difficult perspective in researching the holographic brain model. Through this research, it became clear that our current understanding of functional neurological potential was about to change. Functional neurological potential. Our current understanding of functional neurological potential. I think what he means is that medical science, the neurological potential is no disease, but there's nothing beyond that. So if you're diseased, they can help you through neurology, the practice of neurology and medicine, to reach your potential to be normal. But functional neurological potential, I think, means you don't have a disease, but you could improve your function. Maybe your function is less than your potential. And so through this research, it became clear that our current understanding of functional neurological potential was about to change. Through 20 years, the wheel has turned to reveal that epigenetic changes in the human cell are changes in the human cell. Why does he have to say human cell? Epigenetic changes are the focus for our future. This information clarifies years of theory that we are subjects of our experiences and our attitude to life based on those experiences. This information, what information? The research. Through this research. What is the research? At that time, Carl and David were considering a very different perspective in researching the holographic brain model. Through this research. Wait, so first they're considering it, and now he's jumping to, they've done the research, and it became clear that our current understanding of functional neurological potential was about to change. It was about to change after they do more research, or they have to interpret the research. If they've already done the research, why hasn't their understanding already changed? Does he mean the mainstream understanding once they read the research? I'm confused. So through 20 years, the wheel has turned to reveal. What does that mean? So 20 years of research? Where are the research papers? Let me see them. That'd be cool. I'd like to be enlightened. Has turned to reveal that epigenetic changes in the human cell are the focus for our future. That doesn't make any sense. You could say should be the focus of our future, but reveal. So is he saying he's over 20 years discovered that his new focus is going to be epigenetic changes? I'm confused. This information, again, what information? Clarifies years of theory. Is it research? This research clarifies years of theory that we are subjects of our experiences, subject to our experiences, and our attitude to life based on those experiences. We are subjects of our experiences and our attitude to life based on those experiences. This information clarifies years of theory that we are subjects of our experiences. This information clarifies our attitude to life based on those experiences. I don't know about you, but I don't really, it sounds impressive. This is the weird part. It sounds impressive when you first read it, but then when you try to figure out what is he talking about, it's like word salad. I don't know if any of you, are familiar with the term word salad, but it's like, I don't know if it's a psychological term, but I've heard it in the context of someone who may be a psychopath, or someone who has a nefarious, less than reputable, or let's say, how would I put it, less than honest intention, and is trying to confuse someone and to convince them that they're really smart and that they should do what I'm saying. So I could say a bunch of really fancy big words to confuse you and make you feel kind of stupid, so that you kind of daze over, your eyes glaze over, and you're like, wow, he sounds really smart. I can't follow him, but wow, he's smart, so maybe I should follow him and do what he's saying. I'm not saying that's what's happening here, but either whoever wrote this is a very poor communicator, or there's some sort of intention to confuse the reader while making the reader sense that this guy's smart or something. The way we approach and react to circumstances on a daily basis will in turn determine cellular changes on all levels of function. Cellular changes on all levels of function. Cellular changes on all levels of function. Changes on all levels. What changes? So good changes, bad change. So I guess it depends on your approach, and your reaction to circumstances each day will in turn determine cellular changes on all levels of function. It's like, we know what he's saying in this one, that depending on how we react to what happens to us, our reaction to what happens affects the health of our body on all levels of function. But why can't he just say that the way we approach and react to our daily life, the way we react to life affects our health. I mean, why does he have to say the cellular changes in all levels of function? Just say the way we respond to life affects our health. If we respond to life negatively, it'll have a negative impact. I'm assuming that's what he means. If we have a positive approach to life, it'll affect our health positively. But why is this is bizarre. Determine cellular changes on all levels of function. I don't know what that means. The bottom line is whether we are able to maintain a congruent signal from the brain that enables surveillance over every cell at all times. Surveillance. Okay, so this is an oxymoron. I mean, so maintain a congruent, I don't know what that means by congruent, but maintain a signal, a congruent signal, a signal from the brain. So that means something's going from the brain out of the brain to the body, right? The brain's sending a signal. So maintain a brain signal that enables surveillance. Surveillance means to watch over. So the only way the brain can watch over things is by getting signals from the body. So surveillance, by definition, is a signal coming from the body to the brain. But he's saying we have to maintain signals from the brain in order to enable surveillance. It's really confusing. there is a reality here, if I don't know if he's aware of it, and I already told it to you, that the brain sends a signal down to the gamma motor neuron, which comes out of the spinal cord and goes to the stretch receptor muscle. It goes to the intrinsic muscles of the stretch receptor to make it more or less sensitive. And that regulates the tone. It regulates how much input comes back to the brain. So the brain's output in that case can, in a way, regulate how much information gets back to the brain. And that actually is, that pathway I just described, is how all manual therapies, from massage to physical therapy to chiropractic, most likely acupuncture, that's how they work. That's in my opinion, the only way to explain how they work. It's the only only receptor that's able to be regulated by the brain. And when you change how much input those receptors are sending to the brain, you can change brain function. So brain function out changes brain function in. I guess I'm not really communicating that very well either. But he's being, at least I'm trying to be specific. He's being pretty vague here. Bottom line, whether we are able to maintain a congruent signal from the brain that enables surveillance over every cell at all times. We have surveillance over every cell at all times, regardless of whether there's congruent signals coming out of the brain. I don't know, it doesn't make any sense to me. The receptors in the body, their main job is to constantly send signals to the brain to tell the brain what's going on. They can't stop. There's no way they can stop. The muscle spindles can send more or less, but they can't stop. So it's confusing. Research at the University of Frankfurt in Germany is about to start by investigating changes to heart rate variability in children after NIS treatment. Okay, cool. So that's the first thing that makes sense to me. It's very clear. Research at this university is about to start by investigating changes to heart rate variability in children after this treatment. So this is what needs to happen. So regardless of whatever his theory is as to how it works, this will tell us if it works, because heart rate variability is a measure, a well-known, solidly validated through scientific research measure of health. And the change in variability from one day or 1 month to the next tells us whether you're getting more or less healthy in general. So if his NIS treatment helps increase the heart rate variability, then it would most likely be a positive, good treatment for you to receive. So there's no date on this. I don't know when they're about to start and how we sign up to get updates on that, but he says it's true, so it must be. The journey continues to open pathways of excitement, and I envisage that through the next 20 years there will be a global recognition of NIS principles to accompany mainstream thinking. Accompany mainstream thinking. Okay. Well, before he was saying he wanted to go beyond mainstream thinking. So now he's going to make his beyond mainstream mainstream. All right. Thank you for your continued support to spark awareness in a world where health is dominated and generated by medical conflict and confusion. Huh. So he ends it off with another jab at the medical profession. Interesting. Well, I would say you're not adding too much clarification to the situation based on this website so far. Okay, so that was NIS continues to evolve, which actually makes me more confused than before I read it. The research link is broken. Let's look at the testimonials. Somehow I have a feeling this link won't be broken. It's not. Long-term sunstroke. I'm enormously grateful. My symptoms were dire for the last 20 years, have miraculously completely disappeared. That's amazing and awesome. Wow, he has previously always been scuttling about seeking shade wherever possible. He has been walking in the sunshine on the sunny side of the street. I must say I didn't have a lot of faith in your treatment, but thought it worth a go, and now I'm fully convinced. So awesome. So he is helping some people. That's really great. Here's the stroke. Constantly impressed with the results that patients achieve. Okay, so this is a doctor who's using it. Even after returning home after the very first Part 1 seminar on the Sunday evening, I went to visit an elderly relative who'd suffered a stroke on the Friday. He had the whole right side of his face dropped with weakness and dribbling. I treated only his cortical integration, and within 30 minutes, we all watched while his face returned to normal. Great. I mean, that's awesome. That's really awesome. Again, these are just testimonials, and it is a form of evidence, an important form of evidence, but it's one of the lower tiers. Hormonal issues, blood issues, good health, fatigue, muscle spasm, numbness. So good, they're helping people. So it sounds. NIS Masters 2020. Viral incubation, the stealth of misdiagnosis, inflammation, what starts it. So it looks like these are the topics at their next NIS seminar, Masters seminar. It's in Australia. Let's click to register in Australia. So it's 2,250 NZD. NZD, New Zealand dollar. NZD to US dollar. Calculator, this one. Okay, so it's about 15 or 1,600 US dollars. And this is a 3-day seminar. Okay, so not the most expensive, but definitely not the cheapest. The NET seminar, the first 2-day seminar is about 400. So for 3 days would be 600. So this is 2.5 times as expensive as NET. Okay, not too bad, I guess. That's the foundations. The masters in Australia. Oh wait, let's go back. This is masters. Oh, it's not open yet. Okay, and let's just click here to make sure that that's not something different. Looks like a blog meeting with Dr. Bruce Lipton. The last entry was in 2017. What we do is scientific and accurately different. Let's read that one, please. NIS is an innovative, standalone approach to healthcare management. Okay. Developed by Neuralink in New Zealand, NIS research is based on proven principles of neuroscience and physiology. There are 4 reasons you may wish to investigate treatment with an NIS practitioner. 4 reasons your cells are potentially capable of restoring and repairing cellular mayhem. Suddenly, this sounds like normal English to me. This is cool. 4 reasons why you may have blood pressure, asthma, or cancer. 4 reasons that you are alive. Okay? With NIS, we investigate these 4 reasons from a functional viewpoint. I think that means non-medical viewpoint, non-pathological viewpoint. This is the viewpoint ignored by medicine. There you go. If the prospective function of your body was thoroughly examined, your cellular intelligence would have a voice to speak. Sadly, that voice is suffocated by the suppressive symptomatic assessment you have received from medical sources that are negatively focused on your future. Okay, now it's just suddenly gone wacko, meaning it doesn't make any sense. If the prospective, what is prospective function? Your future function of your body was thoroughly examined. How do you examine future function? Your cellular intelligence would have a voice to speak. And I'm hoping and assuming that he's speaking metaphorically here, that it wouldn't literally talk. Sadly, that voice is suffocated, again, a metaphor, by the suppressive symptomatic assessment. Symptomatic assessment is extremely helpful and valuable if you know what you're doing. If you know what you're looking for, symptomatic assessment is the best way to know how to help someone. So I don't know how symptomatic assessment could be suppressive unless you're doing it wrong. If you're doing symptomatic assessment poorly, then it would, or belligerently, then it could be suppressive. You have received from medical sources that are negatively focused on your future. How are they negatively focused on your future? I don't get it. What are the positive and exciting features that you can recall about your last medical rendezvous other than a prescription to stifle your cellular intellect? All right, that's very loaded, that sentence. Wow. I'm at a loss. So many patients comment about the speed of the brain to enable major changes to occur. Comment about the speed of the brain to enable major changes to occur. Really? They comment about the speed of the brain to enable major changes to occur? I doubt they say those words. Your blood moves around your body completely every 21 seconds, makes 2.5 million red cells per second. It makes 2.5 million red cells per second? Really? I somehow don't think that's true. Your blood moves around your body completely every 21 seconds? 21 seconds. Really? Okay. I'm just going to let that one pass. I don't want to look that up. I don't understand. Let's see if he has a point. Have someone touch a hair on your head and you will feel it. and be able to account for the sensory smartness of one neuron or nerve fiber of your brain. What? What are you talking about? Okay, so have someone touch a hair on your head, so one hair, and yes, I can feel it, and be able to account for the sensory smartness, I think he means the sensation, of one. Okay, so when you feel it, he's saying you're feeling it because a single neuron and nerve fiber talked from the hair follicle to your brain. That is completely false. There's no way. I have to just look this up because that's ridiculous. That's I don't understand how he could be that stupid, or how he could expect the people taking his classes to be that stupid. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's look this up. How many sensory receptors does a single hair have? Assuming you guys can see this. Let's see. Yeah, cool. It's not really a question that has much relevance, but okay, so let me look this up here. Hair cells are the sensory receptors of both the auditory system and the vestibular system in the ears of all vertebrates. Okay, so that's different. A hair cell is an anatomical term for a receptor in your hearing and balance centers in your ear, middle, and inner ears. So that's not what we're looking for. Okay, how about this? What kind of sensory receptors are associated with hair follicles? Hair follicles are the structures from which a hair strand grows. They receive oil, which is secreted by the sebaceous glands. The sebaceous glands are responsible for the production of oil, which is found at the root of the hair strand. So I can't see that answer. The central nervous system is kept continually informed of the ever-changing external and internal environment of the body by way of centrally directed signals which arise in its many and varied receptors. So that mostly makes sense to me. The central nervous system is kept continually informed of the ever-changing external and internal environment, that makes perfect sense to me, of the body by way of centrally directed signals. So I guess they mean once the signals come in, the central nervous system directs them, which is sort of true. You could say it that way, I guess, which arise in its many and varied receptors. Right, that makes sense. These receptors report on a wide variety of sensory modalities, including changes in temperature, pressure, touch, sound, light, taste, smell, body, and limb movements. Makes perfect sense. And even blood pressure and chemistry, yes. Scientists have recognized for almost 130 years that certain afferent nerve fibers of the peripheral nervous system are in contact with specialized non-neural receptive structures, okay, which detect and transmit sensory information from the periphery to the CNS. Okay, it makes sense. They haven't told us what those specialized structures are yet. The non-neural receptive structure, together with its afferent nerve fiber, is often called a receptor. Oh, so, right. So the non-neural receptive structure is what I've been calling a receptor, and it's connected to a nerve fiber, and together they're called the receptor. So, fine. Nature has evolved a variety of morphological, meaning shapes, morphological structures which function as receptors. The earliest studies of sensation led to the idea that each morphological receptor type was responsible for the transduction of a particular modality of sensation, meaning depending on the shape of the receptor, it could tell you what type of stimulus it was designed or it evolved to relay to the brain. So light touch, deep touch, pain, temperature, that sort of thing. This early hypothesis has been modified in light of evidence that receptors respond to more than one type of stimuli, right? Oh boy, what happened? Okay, there it goes. An adequate stimulus is that form of stimulation to which a receptor has the lowest threshold. Exactly. So if someone touches you light enough, theoretically you won't feel it because the receptor wasn't able to detect that low of a sensation. For example, a certain type of receptor will respond to a slight mechanical displacement by increasing the impulse firing rate in its afferent nerve fiber. True. The same receptor may also respond when subjected to extreme temperature changes. However, if it has a lower threshold for mechanical than for thermal changes, it is classified as a mechanoreceptor and not a thermoreceptor. Accordingly, receptors are often classified as follows. So this all makes sense to me. It's plain English. It has big words, but it's plain English and it makes sense. And so here's some pictures of the different shapes. Free nerve ending with and without tips, Ruffini endings, the Pacinian corpuscle, Meissner corpuscle, I can't even say these, Krauss's in-bulb, Golgi, Mazzoni corpuscle. So this isn't really helping us. Where are the hair velocity receptors? 4 types of velocity receptors are found in hairy skin. G2 hair receptors are the peripheral ends of a type A beta fibers terminating around the base of guard hairs in the base of hair follicles. Okay, they respond to both slow and rapid movement of hairs and deflection of the skin. Field receptors are associated with type A beta fibers and their terminal morphology is unknown. They respond to indentation of the skin. D hair receptors are the terminal endings of type A delta fibers terminating around the base of both guard and down fine hair. They respond to both slow and rapid movements of these hairs as well as to skin deflection. C mechanoreceptors are rare, typically being associated with non-myelinated type C fibers. Again, big words, but it's clear. Makes sense to me what they're saying. Their terminal morphology is unknown and they respond only to slow displacement of the skin. So it's not clear if there's only one fiber per hair. Is there only one sensory nerve per hair? Or are there multiple? Okay, so I answered the question right now. 4 types of velocity receptors are found in hairy skin. 2 types of transient receptors are found in hairy skin. So the 4 types of receptors, of velocity receptors, they all respond oh, wait a minute. D hair receptors are terminally new type A fiber terminating around the base of both fine hair. Right, so at least 2 of the 4 respond to movement of the hair. And then the 2 down here, Pacinian corpuscles receptors associated with the peripheral ends of a certain type of A alpha and beta fibers. They respond to mechanical taps and vibrations, range of special process at the base of the hair follicles associated with large high velocity guard hair and skin displacement. There you go. So there's at least 3 types of hair nerve receptors. So if you touch a single hair, there's going to be 3 different types of skin receptors that potentially are firing off. And so the sensation you have is likely a combination of those 3 receptors sending signals to your brain. And not only that, but likely there's multiple receptors of each type that would be affected by moving the hair. Just one more thing. Hair, let's see. How density of skin receptors It's not telling me the density. Sensory impulses are initiated in specialized skin receptors and transmitted through sensory nerves, eventually reaching the spinal cord. Different types of pathways are bundled in separate nerve tracts up the spinal cord to relay stations in the brainstem and eventually to brain surface structures in the cerebral cortex. Thus, pathways can be disrupted at numerous sites. So it's in the relay stations that they're modulated, that other article was talking about, by the central nervous system itself. Age-related loss and degeneration of cutaneous receptors and sensory nerve terminals is extensive enough to explain most of the sensory deficits observed in elderly individuals. Thus, sensory impairment seemed to reflect a process starting in the distal axon domain, possibly instigated by changes in nerve target interactions. Instigated by changes in nerve target interactions. That's confusing. I don't know what that means. But they're saying that the sensory receptors degenerate. We lose the numbers of them, and their sensitivity degenerates over time. Incapacitation of the intrinsic machinery that maintains neuron integrity may also contribute to age-related neuronal dysfunction. Given that neuronal longevity in the main matches that of the host organism, post-mitotic cells of the nervous system may be especially susceptible to the cumulative damaging effects of aging. Mechanical wear and tear probably plays a role, however, it is clearly not the only factor. Several lines of evidence suggest that aging has a more deleterious effect on myelinated primary afferents than their unmyelinated counterparts. Neuronal atrophy, axonal lesions, and loss of peripheral nerve endings and receptor organs, as well as of centrally projecting nerve terminals, preferentially affect large myelinated primary afferent neurons. In other words, they don't know. So I can't find it. But I have to say it's highly unlikely that one hair has only one receptor that sends a neuron to your brain. And the reason I think that is that the way the brain works is that you can only sense something in the brain if the signal was strong enough to get through your thalamus. The thalamus is the secretary to the president, and almost all sensations have to go through the secretary first. And then if it's a loud enough signal, then it gets through to the rest of your brain and you're aware of it. So a single nerve cell coming in, I just don't see how that could possibly get through the signal unless you're damaging it somehow with heat. But how would you possibly, they're so small, how would you possibly only affect one nerve cell with heat? So I just think this is ridiculous. And it's a red flag that they're trying to sound really smart and that they're potentially not producing the goods. Have someone touch a hair on your head and you will feel it, of course, and be able to account for the sensory smartness of one neuron or nerve fiber of your brain. So what do you think of the other 100 billion cells are doing in their eagerness to serve you? I don't know what. What are they doing? The neurological integration system is the vehicle to reset disruptive signaling responsible for the 4 reasons of life. Physiology. What is preventing the normal function of how living cells function? What? So physiology is a reason for life? Physiology is not a reason for life. Physiology is a scientific study. It's a course of study at a university of how life works, how cells work, physiology. What is preventing the normal function of how living cells function? Why is function in that sentence twice? I don't get it. Neurology is not a reason for life. It's the study of the nervous system by a scientist or medical doctor. What is averting the dialogue between the brain and the cells? And again, the brain doesn't communicate with the cells except through the hormonal system. Is that what you're talking about? The brain sends hormonal signals to the glands to then secrete adrenaline, and adrenaline then floods the system and talks to all the cells? Are you talking about that? Or are you trying to say that the brain sends nerve signals like you did earlier down to each cell? Because that's just not true. It sends signals down to each muscle cell. The brain sends signals down to each muscle cell in order to move the skeleton, or to move the bowels, or to move the heart. or to tell glands to secrete things. So I guess there's also nerves from the brain that go to glands directly, as well as hormonally. But they don't go to ligaments, they don't go to skin, they go to the muscles in the blood vessels to affect blood flow to the skin cells. But is that really a communication? I'm not sure what they're talking about. I'm afraid that they're trying to tell me that nerves go from the brain to each skin cell, and it's just not true. Immunology, again, is not a reason for life. What is blocking the fundamental pathways that control infection? Okay, I don't know. What is? Emotional stress, why signals and glands are affected by it. So emotional stress is not a reason for life. Are the 4 issues of life working potentially for you? Okay, so now he's changed it from 4 reasons of life to 4 issues of life. So I could maybe see these being called issues of life, but not a reason for life. The NIS system is safe, non-invasive, and non-pharmaceutical. To find a local practitioner, visit our directory. It's safe, I like that. It's non-invasive, I like that. It's non-pharmaceutical, I like that. But pretty much all chiropractic treatments are those 3 things. So how is your system different? I'm still confused. I mean, you sound smart, but I can't understand what you're saying. What we do is scientific and accurately different. Okay, I'm going to click on that again because I don't remember. There's nothing about science in here and nothing about accuracy. Perhaps it's different. Completely misleading. What we do is scientific and accurately different. I didn't find out what the science was. I didn't find out how it's accurate. There's a microscope here. Okay, disappointing. NIS, treating causes at cell level. How? To truly treat causes, you need to start with the building block of life, the human cell. Okay. Each part of the human body is made of cells. True. We have about 100 trillion cells with more than 200 types of cells in the body. Sounds about right. Each cell has an important part to play, and just like parts of your car engine, no matter how insignificant on its own, it is a small part of an important process, and together each process is what makes the engine run. All right, I mean, the car analogies generally aren't that great because that's what medicine does, is it replaces your car parts. It cuts things out and replaces them with other parts, but we can get rid of, I could get rid of my right hand and the rest of my body would function just fine. But you can't get rid of your right front tire. The car won't work right. You can't get rid of one piston. I guess you could get rid of your front fender and it would work just fine, except not in the rain. It would splash all over. Anyway, imagine your brain is like the mechanic, constantly monitoring and tweaking parts of the engine to ensure it continues to run smoothly. Your brain is continuously sending signals to each cell in your body. I wish you would explain how that is, because I'm not seeing that doesn't happen neurologically. It might happen hormonally, but the hormones are not specific messages, they're general messages. So the nerves are like calling someone on the phone and talking to them directly, and the hormones are like getting on television and talking to millions of people all at once, and they can't talk back to you. So the hormonal system is somewhat like the TV situation, and although some of the targets can talk back, and the nervous system is like the telephone. It's not a great analogy either, but tweaking its message to ensure the cell continues to do its job. However, sometimes the signal from the brain doesn't reach the intended cell. Why not? Without the correct information from the brain, the cell may no longer be able to do its job. That is true for muscles. That is completely true for muscle cells. But it's not true for the skin, because there are no brain signals that go from the brain to the skin. If you're talking about the muscles in the capillaries that in the arterioles or the capillary beds that increase and decrease blood flow. And just like your car, if one part of the engine is no longer able to do its job properly, other parts are also affected. The car may still be running, but over time you will start to notice that it isn't running as well as usual, as well as it should be. The same is true for your body. If just one cell isn't functioning, then one area of the body won't be able to operate to optimum. You probably won't notice it at first, but eventually you will start to experience the symptoms that tell you something isn't functioning to optimum level. Symptoms besides labels like asthma, allergies, learning difficulties, chronic fatigue, etc., the list is endless. Symptoms become labels like asthma, allergies, etc. With NIS, we use a treatment method to identify which signals are not getting through to particular parts of your physiology and the cells. Identify which signals are not getting through. Okay, well, how do you do that? Our unique approach means we are able to get the signal restored, allowing the brain to once again go about its job of monitoring and tweaking its message to each cell. Once the cell is again receiving the information, health will be restored. So just like your car, now that all parts of the engine are operating as they should, the car runs smoothly. Only by addressing your health at this depth will you be able to experience long-term substantial results. Only, that's a big statement, because I'm pretty sure I help people. I'm pretty sure thousands of other chiropractors and medical doctors help people experience long-term sustainable results. I think it's just a metaphor. I want to go back because I thought let's see. How does NIS work? Post-central gyrus. No practitioner is capable of making any correction by doing something to modulate a response. Modulate a response. Are you kidding? No practitioner is capable of making any correction. Well, what's your definition of correction? By doing something to modulate a response. I think they're talking trash on chiropractors in general, because we correct the spine by making we put a force into the spine and we correct the dysfunction. So maybe that's what they're talking about, and they're saying this is a fallacy. The doing will only be achieved if the brain will acknowledge the incongruence via the post-central gyrus and therefore is responsible for the outcome. Sounds like word salad to me, but let's go on. How does the practitioner facilitate the brain to make the corrections? Facilitate the brain? How does the practitioner convince the brain to make the corrections? No practitioner is capable of making any correction by doing something. So is facilitating different than doing? I mean, it seems like they're putting themselves out of a job. If you can't do something to modulate a response, the doing will only be achieved if the brain will acknowledge the incongruence via the postcentral gyrus. So in other words, you do have to do something, but the brain has to accept it. How does the practitioner facilitate the brain to make the corrections? NIS facilitates the postcentral gyrus, the message and receiving center of the brain. Message and receiving center. The message center of the brain. I think you mean the sensory, the receiving sensation center of the brain, the sensory center of the brain. To acknowledge the incongruence. NIS facilitates, does that mean stimulates? Excites? Facilitates the postcentral gyrus to acknowledge the incongruence. What incongruence? So dysfunction can now be addressed, corrected by the brain. Okay, so you're helping the brain see that there's a problem so that it can correct it. Is that what you mean? This restores appropriate control of the sensory motor loop. Oh, sensory motor loop. What is the sensory motor loop? Do you know? Because that's really important. Sensory motor loop. First time he's mentioned it. Giving back control to the testing muscle. What testing muscle? What are you talking about? Why we use the postcentral gyrus. Primary sensory area of the brain. Thank you. Why didn't you say that up here? Why didn't you say primary sensory area of the brain? Why did you say the message and receiving center? Allows stereognosis to recognize form and touch. Collective stimulation of this area reinforces recognition by both hemispheres of the respective anatomical contacts being held at the time. That's why we use the postcentral gyrus. Collective stimulation of this area reinforces recognition of the respective anatomical contacts. Okay, but why? Well, I don't get it. The neuroanatomy behind the application of hemispheric integration. Great, let's do it. How is dysfunction addressed? NIS facilitates the postcentral gyrus. Again, the messaging, sending, and receiving center of the brain. Message sending. Postcentral gyrus does not send messages. It receives them. The precentral gyrus sends the messages. I guess the postcentral gyrus sends messages to the frontal lobe and the association cortexes, but that's within the brain. That's a relay station. It's not a sending center of the brain. Anyway, NIS facilitates this postcentral gyrus to acknowledge the incongruence so dysfunction can now be addressed, corrected by the brain. This restores appropriate control of the sensory motor loop, giving back control to the testing muscle. In doing that, normal neurological activity and homeostatic balance is achieved. How? Why? It doesn't make any sense to me. In other words, once the brain acknowledges this dysfunction, the brain will, in its infinite wisdom, correct it with absolute accuracy. So I kind of get that, and it sounds like that. I think that's what I said earlier, that's what he means, is there's a problem. The brain doesn't know there's a problem. You allow the brain, you help the brain see that there's a problem. Once it sees it, it will correct the problem. That's a good philosophy. I like that. Why not just say that instead of all this gobbledygook word salad pretending that you're doing some advanced neurological thing? No practitioner is capable of making any correction by doing something to modulate a response. That's okay, so there's that again. How does the brain acknowledge? This integrative or acknowledgement process involves the practitioner gently tapping a very precise area of the cranium. Although on the face of it, this may seem too simple and esoteric to be valid, that is most definitely not the case. With NIS, we are working with a very defined area of neuroanatomy. a defined area of neuroanatomy. Really? Okay. What does that mean? Defined area of neuroanatomy. Firstly, when the skin is touched, Merkel's tactile discs associated with slow adapting receptors are stimulated. Great. These mediate light touch sensations which project centrally via the spinal thalamic tracts and the dorsal column medial lemniscus pathway. Why do we need to know that? This neural pathway is directly associated with the postcentral gyrus. Okay, fine. So you're telling me that when we touch the skin, the postcentral gyrus gets stimulated. Why are you saying directly associated? You would say, why not just say this pathway ends in the postcentral gyrus? But it doesn't. It goes through the thalamus first. It goes to the thalamus, and from the thalamus it goes to the postcentral gyrus. Why are you skipping that step if you're going to be pedantic about it? Secondly, so here's what he's saying. We touch an area, the brain senses it in the magical postcentral gyrus. Secondly, when the skin is touched, there are receptors stimulated that project sensation via the DCML to the postcentral gyrus. Wait, so the first and second steps are the same? So the first step is light touch goes to the postcentral gyrus. Secondly, when the skin is touched, there are receptors stimulated that project sensation to the postcentral. Are you kidding me? The first and second reason are the same. Thirdly, Pacinian corpuscles found in the dermis of the skin respond to contact and pressure. Again, this sensation is mediated to the postcentral gyrus. The key function of the DCML is to recognize form by touch, sterognosis, and recognize the position of body parts in space. These both relate to the postcentral gyrus, making it the message and dispatch center of the brain. Okay, so I guess this is his theory, and by the way, the third one's the same as the first and second. I guess that he's saying that there's different types of receptors. Who really cares? Like, they're all going, according to him, through the dorsal column, which I think is true. What does it matter? You're stimulating the skin going through the dorsal column to the postcentral gyrus, which is the primary somatosensory cortex. Why not just call it that, which is more common, making it the message and dispatch center of the brain. I don't know what you mean by message and dispatch center. And then it's the primary somatosensory cortex. Somato means body, sensory. It's the primary place of the brain that senses the body. Can you just say that? It makes me feel like you're trying to knowledge flex with some kind of crazy psycho word salad. But I'm fascinated with this, recognize the position of body parts in space, the statognosis, something to do with the holographic thing you mentioned in the other thing. But, okay, it's not really helping me understand much of what you're doing. Sterognosis and the postcentral gyrus. Close your eyes. Yeah, so you're just saying it again with the hair thing. Close your eyes and have someone touch one hair on your head. That is your postcentral gyrus relaying the message. Relaying the message. Relaying the message to what? And to who? From where? You're telling us it's going from the skin to the postcentral gyrus, but then where does it go from there? And are you saying it goes back to the skin? Are you trying to say that the message goes from the skin to the postcentral gyrus, and then from there, it sends a signal back to modulate the skin? Because that's not exactly true, unless you're trying to say that there's a sympathetic blood flow response. That's true. In order to feed the receptors that are doing work now because you're touching them, You get blood flow specifically shunted to that area that you've touched, but that's not mediated through the postcentral gyrus. That's mediated through the sympathetic nervous system. And I believe that that is a spinal cord reflex, that when you touch the skin, the receptors, when they go into the spinal cord, before they head up the cord to your brain, a branch comes off and stimulates the IML, intermedial lateral cell column, big words for the sympathetic nervous system. From there, a nerve comes out through the sympathetic, back out the same nerve route, and then goes into the sympathetic ganglion, and then stimulates the postsynaptic nerve that then goes along the sympathetic nerve pathway to the exact location, the blood vessels in the exact location that you just stimulated, that you just touched. It's a fascinating, very specific, amazing system, but it's not, to my knowledge, regulated through the postcentral gyrus. So that sounds like bunk to me. Doesn't mean the technique doesn't work. The technique could be awesome, and it could work really well and really help people. In fact, I'm sure it does. But the explanation is very confusing and suspicious. Okay, so muscle testing is the last one I want to look at here, because I am a connoisseur and probably an expert in muscle testing. I'd like to think, though I have a lot to learn about it. Practitioners using the NIS system use a muscle test to determine where and why neurological potential has been reduced. Neurological potential. Why are they calling it that? It doesn't make sense to me. We use muscle testing as a benchmark to retrieve data from the brain. That makes no sense. We use muscle testing as a benchmark. Do you mean a tool? Because we do store tools on benches. We use muscle testing as a tool to retrieve data from the brain. Retrieve data. It's a weird way to say it. How about we use muscle testing as a tool to examine the patient's nervous system? Can we change it to that, please? We use muscle testing as a tool to examine the patient's nervous system. Because it's technically not connected to their brain. It's like if you had a plug in the brain and you plugged a wire into it and put it into your computer, then you could retrieve data from the brain, assuming it was somehow interfaced. Then it would make sense to say that. But the arm is not plugged into the brain. There are nerves that go from the brain to the arm, but you're not plugging into them and interfacing with those nerves. You're using the function, the output function of the brain in the form of a muscle test, and that's modulated by the input sensation of the joint and muscle mechanoreceptors and stretch receptors, and to some degree the skin receptors, when the doctor's pushing on the skin receptors. So that's a weird way. I don't know why they're saying it that way. How does a muscle test identify a disconnected circuit? Please tell me. Using the NIS system, practitioners will evaluate which neurological pathways have been pushed past their tolerance level. Great. And have become disconnected. Okay. By contacting specific combinations of anatomical locations. Anatomical locations. Why not just say locations? A muscle under resistance will weaken if the brain fails to understand the relativity or relationship of those contact areas. Okay, so I just have to say that I do muscle testing, and it is a tool to assess the nervous system. The patient can touch different locations on their skin, and sometimes their ability to hold their muscle during the test will change depending on where they're touching on their skin. It's a phenomenon that might be a type of placebo, but it seems like it's a real phenomenon that we can use to track down to examine the person and their how their body's functioning, and combine that with their symptomatology and their history to make, and other exam findings to make an assessment and a diagnosis and a treatment plan. But the exact neurological reason, the exact reason why when the patient touches certain locations on their skin, why it changes the result of changes their ability to hold their muscle during a muscle test in one position, has been attempted. That many smart people have attempted to explain what's happening. So it's either some kind of fake thing that us doctors subconsciously are faking and it's not a real thing, or it's a real thing and we need to figure out how it works and why it works and what does it mean. And a lot of smart people have been trying to figure that out for a long time. And if we could figure that out in a way that everybody can agree on for the most part, and it seems to be congruent with what we know from the scientific literature and anatomy and physiology, I think it would help us to advance our understanding of how the body works and our ability to diagnose more accurately and so forth. And so he's saying, by contacting specific combinations of anatomical locations, a muscle under resistance will weaken if the brain fails to understand the relativity or relationship of those contact areas. So in his opinion, the reason this phenomenon happens is that the brain is failing to understand the relativity or relationship of those contact points. Okay, so whatever, like that's one person's opinion. Maybe that's right. Let's just assume that's right. How is data retrieved from the brain using NIS? So that's the next topic. How is data retrieved? Okay, so that's a good next topic. Muscles in the body should at all times be able to resist a given force. That's not true. What about when you're sleeping? I mean, obviously, right? He's not talking about when you're sleeping. What if you've just ingested a poison? What if you just stepped on a nail and it hurt? What if you have PTSD and you're stuck in a fetal position, neurological, a fetal position emotional pattern, then you would expect that some muscles would not be able to resist a given force. What about after tapping the deep tendon reflex of the knee? What about when I'm contracting my bicep? Should the bicep of the other arm be able to resist a given force just as well as when I'm contracting the opposite tricep? I would say no. So that's a very simplistic viewpoint. Muscles in the body should at all times be able to resist a given force. I just don't, that's not true. And in applied kinesiology, we put a stimulus into the belly of a muscle attempting to temporarily affect the muscle spindle cell stretch receptor. And when we do that, the muscle we did that to will appear to weaken temporarily. And I would say that's normal. But anyway, this will be easy when integrity of the sensory motor loop exists. Okay, so maybe he could say then, if you step on a nail, there's not integrity of the sensory motor loop. Therefore, it would explain why you can't resist a force that contradicts the withdrawal reflex that you're in. Perhaps when I'm spindling down a muscle spindle in AK, that's messing with the integrity of the sensory motor loop, and so therefore it would explain why it turns the muscle off. Okay, fine. The NIS protocols collectively evaluate integrated function of the body. Each step determines congruence between the brain and certain neurological centers. These centers may be derived from cortical, spinal, visceral, and glandular circuits. Okay, we're getting into something different here. The NIS protocols collectively evaluate integrated function of the body. Why don't you just say the NIS protocols evaluate the body? Can we just say that? Each step determines congruence between the brain and certain neurological centers. So the brain as a whole between certain parts of the brain, congruence between the brain as a whole and certain parts of the brain. That doesn't make sense to me. These centers may be derived from cortical, spinal, visceral, and glandular circuits. Okay? So the pituitary, the hypothalamus, the brainstem, or are you talking about the actual glands in the body and the actual viscera in the gut? Or are you talking about the centers in the brain that control those things? I don't know, it's not clear to me. If neurological confusion exists, the information referred via the sensory motor loop will produce gross muscle weakness of any originally strong muscle elected for testing. So I think what he's trying to say is that you have a muscle that passes a muscle test, so it's strong, and then the patient or the doctor or both, I'm not sure, touches certain parts of the body. I'm guessing they're going to be reflexes, quote unquote, that are related to certain parts of the brain or certain circuits. And when you touch those skin areas, he's saying it stimulates the somatosensory cortex, whatever, I forget what he's calling it, the post-central gyrus. And if there's a misunderstanding, if there's a problem in that circuit, by the patient touching that reflex, it will let the somatosensory cortex know that there's a miscommunication between the brain and that circuit. And when that happens, there will be that same muscle will fail the muscle test by being weak. I think that's what he means. Muscles in the body should at all times be able to resist a given force. This will be easy when integrity of the sensory motor loop exists. Yeah, he said that. The NIS protocols collectively evaluate integrated function of the body. Each step... Yeah, okay, I guess we read that. Who developed muscle testing? Muscle testing has been used widely for many years and remains the most accurate means of assessing data from the brain. All right, first of all, he doesn't mention George Goodhart, which is horrible, because he either is ignorant of George Goodhart, doesn't know who the guy is, or he's purposefully leaving him out. And without George Goodhart, no one would be muscle testing today. No one, he would not be muscle testing. No one would be muscle testing. Just a minute. Anyway, long story short, that's horrible for him to not mention George Goodhart. Very bad sign, in my opinion. And so far, what I can deduce is that there's one muscle, since it's all muscles that he's claiming will weaken. Why test more than one muscle when any muscle will do? So it's one muscle. We're touching skin receptors to check for a weakening of that one muscle during the muscle test. And then we're deducing a whole bunch of stuff as to what the problem is. I have to say that there are probably hundreds of treatment techniques that do something very similar to this. One arm, muscle tested, doctor or patient touches different skin reflexes to see if it weakens the strong muscle. And then they jump to huge conclusions as to what that means. And then they base their entire treatment protocol on that. This is a huge disappointment if this is what they're doing for their assessment. I don't know yet what the treatment is. It sounds like it's tapping, which is a fine treatment. There's whatever, that's a fine treatment. One muscle, having the patient touch points, is a fine examination if it's one part of your exam integrated into a whole network of questions and history and exam findings. If this is what they're doing, there's nothing new here, in my opinion, other than the philosophy behind it and how they are explaining what they're doing, and perhaps the combination of doing this, which is not new, with the specific tapping that they're doing. In my opinion, this is not a neurological, this is not a neuroscience-based treatment technique any more than any other treatment modality out there, just from what I'm seeing on the website. Now, maybe the website is poorly written, maybe it's wrong, maybe it has nothing to do with the technique. Maybe if I took the class, I would change my mind. But as it is right now, just based on the website, and again, it's limited, I'm sure that they do good work with some people, and that a lot of patients have been healed from, like most treatments out there have a good track record. At least half their patients get better, probably. But I'm sorry to say, I don't see much at all that's neurologically, in their terms, based. It's not based on principles of neuroscience. The theory probably is based on that, but I would say overall a disappointing website. I gotta go. Send me all your hate mail and we can discuss it.